It's now been over 2 years since Echo 2K released his debut album E, and 3 seconds since this video has become dated. Despite not releasing an official solo album until 2019, Echo 2K has been in the business of putting together sounds and words to make pieces of art that can be consumed through your ears since the mid to late 2000s when he was in a black metal band with the guy from Lady Bird. Where he really came into his own commercially and artistically though was around 2013 when he put out strange but beautiful singles like Bleach and Hold Me Down Like Gravity with his buddies in the Gravity Boys Shield Gang Sad Future Odd Boys Kill Them All Collective, or GTBSG for short. Fans were so desperate to hear an entire album from this guy that they said screw it and made it themselves out of bells and whistles in 2018, only for them to be quaking in fear just a year later at the jaw-droppingly original title of his first full-length album. Now, despite a couple, and I do mean 2 songs from Echo's back catalog making it onto the tracklist of E, he completely reinvented himself here and sounds like an entirely different artist from the guy who made Spiced Out in the Jeep Crystal Meth Shorty. Everyone else in his clique seems to have dove in headfirst into the fruitful sounds of artsy pop music over the last couple of years, and when all your friends dive off a cliff, you should too. The sound fits Echo really well, as in my and everyone else's opinion, he's the most talented of the group vocally, and you can tell the sound suits him right from the first track. When AAA Powerline was released as a single back in 2018, I thought it sounded cool, but kind of wished that 191 of its 252-second runtime wasn't just him repeating the hook over and over again. I also thought it was about John Denver playing Dead Space. Hearing it in context as an opener, though, gives it new purpose, as it functions as a hazy overture that's repetitive lyrics illustrate the seemingly inescapable cycle of drug addiction, which is one of the album's main themes. The mellowed-out instrumental plays off of this, as it keeps the listener comfortable with their surroundings, despite how much pain our protagonist is in. Peroxide expands upon this as Echo continues country roads that he will eventually snort, but instead of being mellowed out, the song sounds stressful with its distant synth arpeggios, sporadic ambient bits, and hi-hats that sound like an irregular heartbeat. It's like he's coming down off of the high from the previous track and is forced to confront how miserable he truly feels. His mind state is made worse by all of the prejudiced jagoffs who judge him for how he looks, as he expresses feeling outcasted for having darker skin than the majority of Sweden's population on numerous tracks, including this one. Fragile is another song with a calm instrumental. I'm detecting a pattern here. Only not really, as rather than just being another moment of,
"Oh, I hit my pen in the bathroom, so I'm totally good for this class period, man."
Fragile uses its time to be genuinely introspective and have some of the coolest lyricism on the album. Echo describing himself as shattered glass held together by bubble wrap that washes himself using gasoline and matches is one of the coolest ways I've heard anyone describe their own insecurities on a song. The whole thing is like an internal monologue with its claustrophobic instrumental and freely flowing song structure that allows for various vocal melodies, giving off the feeling of fleeting thoughts while high that are only vaguely stuck together with a purple Elmer's glue stick. Bliss Fields and Fruit Bleed Juice are 2 short interludes that appear right next to each other in the track list. If you've ever read the 10 Commandments, you know that number 12 states,
"Thou shalt not place 2 interludes next to each other in the track list of thy albums."
But Echo does this anyway because he's so cool. The only instrumentation on Bliss Fields is the distant chirping of birds as Echo softly speaks a really cool lyrical motif. It might only be 22 seconds, but the track makes me feel like I'm holding hands with him while sitting under a weeping willow counting the amount of clouds shaped like bunnies on a nice 75-degree spring afternoon.
I feel like I'm flying and sinking at the same time.
As far as the actual content goes, I love how it communicates his feelings of numbness and confusion in a way that's poetic and interpretable without being too obtuse. Meanwhile, Fruit Bleed Juice is one of the coolest sounding songs on the record, feeling like an updated take on some of the early ambient pop that was on the fan-assembled Beauty Sleep, which I'd highly recommend if you haven't heard already. Part of me wishes this track was longer or had its ideas reworked into something more fully fleshed out, as it creates this gorgeously hypnotic atmosphere that I feel like I could get lost into for, it's over already. CC, named after the 30th US president, Calvin Coolidge, is probably one of the most unique cloud rap songs ever recorded. He pulls a trick from the Goth Money textbook, giving it a slow introduction that takes up nearly half of the song, but with how that beat comes in, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's like how old jazz records begin with a melody that establishes the key, tempo, and time signature to give it a sense of home before musicians would improvise over it. The track holds on to the abstract ambience of the intro throughout its entire runtime, while constantly playing with its tempo and melodies. The vocals here are treated more like another instrumental layer than a way of communicating lyrics on top of everything, except for when the track quiets down and we hear the phrase "energy is eternal." I've heard some people refer to this song and a few others from this album as hyperpop, which is like the Wii U of music genre tags, but honestly, I don't hear it. Calcium is one of the greatest songs ever written in the history of humanity and should be in the Library of Congress right next to You're a Grand Old Flag by Bill Murray. It's one of the more conventional tracks in its song structure, instrumental, and vocal performance, but it's so beautifully executed. The song is about falling in love and longing for a connection with a certain person, but liking ketamine a little too much for things to actually work out. In fact, the second verse is pretty much just him panicking at the thought of possibly overdosing, or how he feels his life is entirely fueled by his addiction. To quote Genius.com, Echo is horny, and he do be fragile. Damn, that site really went downhill after the Backpack Kid.
I be flossing.
The instrumental is able to sound huge while maintaining the sense of minimalism, with its rhythm mostly being carried by a few bass notes and some synth swells that make it sound like an electronic orchestra from the future. It's fitting to the song's lyrics, as Echo's reality is completely clouded by all of the drugs he's on, making him feel euphoric, but never truly freed from his crippling mental issues. It's all brought together with one of the catchiest hooks on the album, and even ends with that same lyrical motif from Bliss Fields, putting it into a whole new perspective.
I feel like I'm flying and sinking at the same time.
Sugar and Diesel is a really nice cool down from the intensity of the last few tracks, but still reads like the transcript of an NA meeting. In fact, I think it's more lyrically blunt than any other song on the record, with lyrics directly addressing his health and how needing medical attention for his addiction makes him feel like a burden to those around him. It's genuinely heartbreaking to hear him say things like, that dreamy downtempo beat on this song makes the instrumental sound like a peaceful overworld theme from Sonic Colors, which on paper might not be fitting to the depressing lyrics, but I think it works because it emphasizes the denial of his condition while being minimal enough to get the lyrics across when they need to be heard more than ever. Don't Ask was the other song released as a single a year before this album came out, and was a good way to get our ears watering for Echo's new sound. His vocals on here use a part of his range that he hadn't really shown much of prior to the song's release, with a soprano that gracefully plays off of this psychedelic beat. The instrumental sounds like someone repeating a xylophone melody in the Grand Central Terminal Whispering Gallery, combined with not much else, actually. Its only percussion comes from the melody itself, and the same can be said for the bass line. Hell, I don't even think there's any sub-bass. Despite its sparseness compositionally, the amount of reverb and usage of background vocals makes it sound a lot more dense than it really is, finding beauty in its own simplicity. Lyrically, Echo is reflecting on a relationship that ended and is getting deep in his own head about it. In fact, the version on the album was slightly altered to be even lonelier than the single, removing the audio watermark, a sample of Blade's voice, 2 words from the title, and -5 seconds. In fact, there's not a single feature on this entire album, which I think is a first for a full-length solo Drain Gang project. This means that at the time of me writing this, Echo 2K has never had a feature on any official solo album of his. Take that, J. Cole! Security is probably the second greatest song ever written in the history of humanity after Calcium, and it's apparent why in the first 5 seconds. It has this wonderfully bubbly synth melody that's further brought to life by these ice-cold crescendos that creep up in the background when the hook comes in. It's like if the Postal Service did a promotional song for the next Ice Age movie. That's an awful comparison. Why did I write that? Echo sounds completely on edge, seeing and hearing things that aren't there and wishing he was a different person, which is brought out perfectly by the trippy pop beat. Much like the first song, I feel that this instrumental traps the listener into the terrifying cacophony by making it so catchy that you don't want to stop listening, even though there are corpses and monsters everywhere. As a wise man once said,
lyrics can't really bring out emotions in music, but music can bring out emotions in lyric.
Time takes the skeleton of a conventional trap beat and turns it into a heavy, dark, and paranoid anthem about his love for the God of War franchise. The abrasive vocal effects and repetitive lyrics make for one of the most tense tracks on the album, being made even freakier with a beat that sounds like a broken music box. I swear this song comes in my head every time I take a test. And finally, the closing track, Blue Eyes, is easily the ugliest and most tortured song on the album, with its music being made up of feedback and blood-curdling screams. It's like every song leading up to this point was him trying to stay calm in his own head, even though something was very wrong, and now he's able to let everything out, like he's screaming into a pillow, only were the pillow. It's also an interesting contrast to the opening track, which is the longest and most mellowed out song on the album, by being the loudest and shortest, except for this one and this one. Lyrically, it's about feeling outcasted for looking different from all of his friends with blue eyes and presumably white skin, which is made more powerful by the instrumental sounding more external and vivid than previous tracks. It may only be about a minute and a half, but it leaves a lasting impression and ends the album off on a horrifying note. So overall, I think E is a profoundly surreal, beautiful, chaotic, scary, psychedelic, dark, futuristic, abstract, weird, melancholic, and everyone's favorite, ethereal examination of a mental downward spiral. Each song is an extension of the last, building up a vivid portrait of drug addiction fueled by insecurity and self-loathing. In a lot of ways, it feels like the most fully complete artistic vision of Drengang's drugged out and depressive ethos that's futuristic and sometimes challenging while still being super replayable. It does this while sounding entirely different from anything that Blade, Tyboy, or even Echo himself has released thus far, and I can only hope to see this group continue to evolve like they have been over the past couple of years. But Spiced Out in the Jeep Crystal Meth Shorty still isn't on here. 7 out of 10.
Hey there, fancy pants. Play the songs that make us dance. Play